I mean, we love stories. That should be indication enough that maybe we should be a little bit suspicious of the fact that we're coming from story so much. If we love stories and we use them as pieces of entertainment, as pieces of fiction that we consume in order to generate a different emotional and psychological state, then we should question that, I would think. You go, okay, so this is actually essentially a piece of entertainment. I've always wondered what great storytellers would make of that. You know, if you could sit down like a Stephen King and a Quentin Tarantino and then go, right, so you guys love stories. These are people who tell stories, but they're telling stories from the point of view of people who love to have stories told to them. They love stories. So you say, okay, you love stories, but are you aware of how that shapes a person's worldview? Are you aware of how that shapes a society's worldview? I'm sure both of them are perfectly well aware of it. In a therapeutic context, in a coaching context, one of the things that happens is you can end up wrestling with a client for possession of the narrative, and people get very, very attached to their stories. They get more attached to their stories than you would expect. You'd expect people to be attached to their religious beliefs, their political views, and everything else, but the stories of their lives and the stories of who they are, way more attached to it than that. Given that the story comes with this kind of clinging attachment, like I need this in order for everything to make sense, the idea of there not being a story should have appeal. So I'm not saying throw all the stories out. What I'm saying is explore the possibility of what it would be like if the narrative that you had of everything, everything that's happened, everything that will happen, the way your life looks now, if it was loosened and there was a gap put in there and you just went, can I change the story? Is there an alternative telling? Is there an alternative version of this story? Can I deal with there being no story there? Can I deal with it just being whatever there is what it is, without having to lay a story onto it? That space, I think, is one of the things that is looked for in meditation and in schools of meditation, like the Zen tradition. It's the gap between thoughts. So the gap between thoughts is the way it's usually said and usually stated. But now I want to suggest that it's actually also the gap between stories. One story ends, a new story begins. And in between those two stories, what have you got? If you've got no words and you've got no narrative and you've got no story, don't you just have I haven't frozen. You just have this. You just have this, whatever this is. Whatever this is. Free from story, with no story layered onto it. Just this. And then you go, well, I can't. Fuck, it can't be just this. No. Anything but that. It can't be just this. It needs to be something more than that. That anxiety about the storylessness is also part of the problem. So then, logically, could it be said that forget Zen, forget meditation, forget anything that sounds Eastern, anything Buddhisty, Hinduisty, Sanskrity, and just think about placing a gap between stories and just going, okay, this is what I thought, this is what I was telling myself was true about the situation, and this is the reality of the situation, and this is the no story of the situation. Because between what you told yourself as being true about the situation, the reality of the situation, and the no story of the situation, they're all things you're telling yourself. So if you go, well, this is what I told myself was happening, but this is what was really happening, it's like, well, isn't that you just telling yourself that's what's really happening? Isn't it just you telling you that this is what's happening? I mean, if you're forced, I don't know, at gunpoint, or somebody's going to give you something that you really want, through leverage, either through pain or pleasure, to view your life and your circumstances in a certain way, if you stretch your imagination, can't you view it that way? No matter where you are now, or where you're up to, or how frustrated you are, or anything else, if you were compelled to, wouldn't you be able to find a way of seeing your life as being a success in a certain sense? And you'd be like, no. And I go, well, try harder, push further, be more flexible, be stronger, be tougher, go further. Don't just give up like that. In what way could your life be said as a story right now to be a success story? Where is the success in your life right now? Or a story of whatever, like a success story or a happy story or a comedy. Is your life a comedy? And you'd be like, no, it's bleak as fuck. And I go, well, stretch further. Don't give up so easily. Look again. Is there nothing funny there? There's no comedy there whatsoever. And you look again and you find, actually, yes. So there's always us telling ourselves a story. So there's two powerful things here. One is the realization that stories in and of themselves become addictive. And I'm saying this to you as basically what I am in essence as a storyteller. And the me communicating through YouTube is me basically telling stories. And then even when you buy a course and the course is supposed to help you do this, that, and the other thing, it really helps you to do this, that, and the other thing by me telling you a story that either convinces you that that's the thing you need to do, or by making that thing an intrinsic part of a narrative. I mean, I released these Cure CPTSD videos 2 months ago, and they got tons of views and loads of really, really positive feedback. And I reviewed them yesterday because people have been saying to me, oh, where's the course that comes off the back of it? I'm like, the Heal the Superego course came out months ago, but I didn't tell people strongly enough or whatever. So I went and reviewed them, and people are really pleased with those videos. They love the Cure CPTSD videos are doing really, really well. The comments are all like some of the strongest comments I've ever had. And I looked at it and I was like, well, it's really only a retelling of the same story. I don't even use different characters. I don't even use different words. I use words and characters that have been used before, just retold again. And it is compelling. So I'm happy that people find value in that. But another part of me, maybe a slightly more mature part of me, is going, don't suck people into stories when ultimately you're then going to have to, at the end of the road, when it comes time to do, it wouldn't even be the black belt test, it would be like the black belt 5th Dan test. You're going to have to say, see all those stories I gave you that got you right here? You're going to have to just get rid of all of them. Even the ones you really, really liked, they've all got to go, because there's limitation in story. There's addiction in story. There's pleasure in story. And we should worry about it. We should be concerned with that. We should be concerned that this is a source of entertainment. Eckhart Tolle has spoken about how the ego feeds on content. The mind feeds on content. He says he doesn't like the term mindfulness because he doesn't want your mind full. He doesn't want it full of more stuff, which makes sense to me. It makes sense to me that we should be looking ultimately to try to I'm using the word story, but what I'm actually talking about is the narrative by which you live. And in a certain sense, it surrounds you. It becomes part of you. It flows through you. It's like in the energy field around you. And when people's stories are very heavily invested in, that sort of field is very, very dense. And then getting them to change that story can be very, very difficult because the field is dense. And it's a shield. It's a field that's a shield, and it pushes people back and away, and it pushes outside influence away. When I look at like the old systems, the old meditation systems, I was looking recently at Hinduism particularly again, and the Kabbalah again, and I'm like, either these fuckers were really good at blagging people, and they just were like flim-flamming and just going, oh, there's all these 13 layers and they have 7 different permutations, but or they may have actually figured something out that was actually technologically, in terms of psychological technology, extremely advanced. Would you overcome CPTSD if all you did was spend the next 10 years in Zen meditation? I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know the answer to that question. But I'm wondering, past a certain point, am I giving people toys that distract them with, or am I giving them stuff that's actually moving them forward? And that's not just being, hyper self-critical and perfectionistic. I know perfectly well in recent times, particularly in the last 4 years, from the feedback I've had from people, no, it's working. It's actually moving people forward. Some people, some of the time, it has hugely beneficial outcomes for them, which is always good to hear. It's always nice to hear that that's happening for some people. But I'm bothered by the words. I'm bothered when I look online or I look on a forum and I see like people on forums going, oh, I followed this guy, Spartan Life Coach on YouTube, and he says, and then a load of words and a load of acronyms and CPSTD and the BPD of the NPD and the da-da-da-da. And I'm like, this sounds like people drenching themselves in more content. This sounds like the ego coming in back via the back door and going, oh, more things, more stuff. Let's have more stuff. Anything other than because it makes you anxious, right? Or it makes you agitated. You're like, wow, what? Serve me, feed me, let me consume more content. This line of reasoning along trying to reconcile like experiences I had in when I was younger, in my teens and my early 20s, and the stuff that I really used to love, and then I stopped looking at it for a few years, and everything else led me to the creation of the Conquer Toxic Passivity course. And I started to get very, very into this idea that we, because of the highly consumerist, materialistic, individualistic culture that we live in, have been entrained consciously, unconsciously, through ideology, implicitly, explicitly, to be receivers of culture, to be containers of culture, tropes, stories, memes, and to pass the memes on. Richard Dawkins said something quite cruel about the human being in the Selfish Gene, and I'm paraphrasing, that we're basically a sock for the DNA to be carried in, and our purpose is just to carry the DNA on. The gene doesn't really give a shit about your poetry, your religion, your hopes, your dreams, your aspirations, happy, sad, or anything. It just wants you to reproduce so that it doesn't die. We're a byproduct in a certain sense. And that we have become entrained to be something like that for culture, for content, for stories. Because of the mesmerizing power of stories, because the mesmerizing power of a narrative, of these spells, these written spells that put people into a state of entrancement and make them like walk around like zombies, repeating weird words and acting in strange ways and repeating other people's weird behaviors. And I started to think it's not just about being stuck on receive when you should be yin yang. You should be transmitting as much as you're receiving. So it's a balance. And the yin yang principle would be, even in your receiving of content, there should always be an element of transmission, or in this context that would mean, to me, interaction with the content, philosophy. Like somebody says something to you and you have the capacity to think about it rationally and analyze it and think it through and debate it and be philosophical about what it is. Not just that yang in the yin has gone, that the transmission was in the receiving has gone, but the receiving has gone on for so long and has been so militarized and so pushed that it actually becomes toxic. It actually becomes a toxified situation where we're receiving, but we're receiving toxic garbage, and the receiver itself, the receiving unit, is malfunctioning, is poisoned, and is toxic itself. So that it's like this double bind, you know, I'm receiving toxicity, but I'm already receiving it in a toxic way. And so I'm carrying like cultural memes that have become like viruses. They're poisonous. And I'm passive and I'm not refusing it, but I can actually just say no. It's really easy. It's frighteningly easy when you get to that place. You're just like, well, no, like, I don't have to listen to that shit. I don't have to do what you say to me. I'm not doing it. And you just opt out. I made the Conquer Toxic Passivity course to try and close the loop on what it means to be codependent, the echo, the fawn, the you know, quote unquote victim of narcissistic abuse. And to be like, okay, where do our responsibilities in that begin and end? And one of the things that I say in the Conquer Toxic Passivity course is we, the codependents, we also poison the relationship. We poison it. In the early phases, we poison it just as much as the abusive personality does by a lack of boundaries. A lack of boundaries is an absolutely poisonous environment, even if you're with somebody who's totally neurotypical. It's not healthy to be a doormat for either partner. It's a poisonous dynamic. And I also said that we, with our lack of boundaries and our codependence, provide an extremely fertile breeding ground for narcissistic abuse to take root and to thrive, where it could not and cannot survive even for a minute amongst the psychologically healthy who have even minimal boundaries, because they just won't tolerate it. They won't put up with it. Not for a second. They won't entertain it. So it just disappears. But I also wanted to look at where we're up to politically, from both sides of the spectrum, from all sides of the spectrum. It's a mess. From where we're up to philosophically, the inability to think, the inability to be rational, the inability to debate, always coming from emotion, always coming from subjectivity, always putting emotion, subjectivity, and opinions above reason, facts, science, evidence. You can't. It might be fun, but it's mob rule. Only the idiots win. The worst, the weakest, the least of us win when those are the rules of the game, because they have no shame and they're happy to scream louder than everybody else. That's not good for the rest of the group. That's not good for everybody else. You shouldn't have the least qualified to be in charge. And this idea came from years ago, like 3 or 4 years ago, when I was watching the political groups dividing, and then I'd see, like, in my head I had 2 circles, and you'd be like, here's the left, okay, it's horseshit. Here's the left, here's the right, both horseshit dynamics, false dichotomy, let's go with it. The most active trolls of the left and the right, and you just see people with massive amounts of personal issues that have now been writ large and politicized, people who clearly are struggling with borderline personality disorder, narcissism, and psychopathy, and losing that battle, then taking that issue to the political arena, and you have these 2 circles, and then in the middle is where the media is, and where all the receivership, the passivity, which then gets transmitted down to the masses. Here are the speakers, here are the microphones, and the most lunatic, loudest, emotionally dysregulated, chaotic, extreme, and dramatic of both of these groups of extremist types push to the middle, where all the receivership is, where all the attention is, where all the focus is, and you're just hearing now from lunatics. The chief lunatic of a band of lunatics. The chief, idiot from, because it used to be like you'd have a village and every village would have an idiot. But now, because of the internet and the democratization of of media, now you have whole armies of village idiots banding together, and nobody's telling them they're wrong, because all the village idiots are going, yeah, we're right, aren't we? Yeah, we are. Yeah, we are. Yeah. And everybody's going, guys, can we just, let's just have a cup of tea. Let's have a little think. What's the end goal here? What are we actually trying to do? Stop shouting. We can all shout. Let's put our inside voice on. Have a little think. What is the objective here? What's the objective? Are we trying to tear our nations apart from the inside? Is that what we're doing? Because this is a fantastic way of getting that job done. Can we just have a little chat? So that then, when you have the two extremes, it trickles down, and then the rest of us who are not involved in these groups, well, we're just fed stories by the mass media, like the liberals want to make every baby gay until it's old enough to declare that it's not, or transgender, and they want to start giving them pills they've decided at the age of 1, screams one news headline. The next news headline is, conservatives want to drown all Muslims in salt water and then throw their limp bodies off the top of a high mountain. Nonsense headlines. And you go, this is silly, it's extreme. I'm sorry. No, it isn't. Go and look on Sky News, BBC News, Fox News, CNN. Look on the websites and tell me that everything isn't reduced to, see these two circles and the gang leaders of lunatics, of a gang of lunatics. Everything now is reduced to screaming nonsense clickbait. Screaming nonsense clickbait. Every story, every issue is reduced to a single sentence. I know. I'm not proud of it, but I'm not ashamed of it. I'm trained in this. I learned internet marketing back in 2004 and 2005 from John Carlton, who's a copywriting expert, Dan Kennedy, who's an information marketing expert, Frank Kern, Corey Riddell. I know how to write a headline, thanks. I know how to evoke emotional responses in people, thank you very fucking much. I know what they're doing. There are courses that teach you, there are free courses online, I can point you to them, that teach you the sequence of words and the specific keywords you have to put in to it's attacking the consciousness of the person who's skim reading. So it must be violent. It must be like, terror Muslims, violent Muslims, killer Muslims. You know? It can't just be like, a Muslim man eating a sandwich and writing some poetry remarked today. It was unusually temperate for that time of year in New York City. Because nobody's going to read it. It doesn't spike the adrenaline. You're supposed to spike people's adrenaline. So that brought me to this place of going, well, what are we looking at here? We're looking at people just being dumb consumers. Dumb in the sense that this form of consumerism doesn't encourage intelligence and doesn't reward it. So even if you are smart, if you keep eating the Kardashians, you'll be dumber. Sorry to tell you. If you keep watching the average TV show and you permit yourself to do 4 or 5 hours a day, as most human beings do, you will get dumber. Sorry. I don't want to trigger anybody. They're like, I watch 5 hours of TV a day and I'm not dumb. You're dumber than you would have been. There's just no way that you're not. There's just simply no, if you're watching the average person's TV content, you're definitely dumber now than you would have been had you chosen not to. That is toxicity. That is passivity. That is you being a receptive wank sock for culture. There's the tagline for the course. Don't be a receptive wank sock for culture. You've got to start pushing back. We've all got to start pushing back. We've got to start going, okay, right, all right, boys and girls, you had your fun. You've had a good 5-6 years now. We're done. We have to check out. We have to take our eyeballs off those screens. Don't fight it. Don't scream about it. For God's sake, don't post about it on social media. You are not an activist if you're blogging or posting on social media. Stop saying that you are. You're not. That's not an activist. Anybody can go, I feel this way about this issue, but whatever. Just don't do that. Just opt out. Just opt out of it. And instead of consuming, start transmitting. Instead of reading books, start trying to write, start journaling, start go to meetup groups. If you can't find one, make one. If you want to create a Spartan Life Coach meetup group in your town, tell me, I'll help you, I'll advertise it. I've been saying this for years. If you want to sit around and just be like, well, you know, the purpose of this group is basically that is this video, post this video or a clip of this video. We don't want to be idiots. Once a week, we want to sit around and we want to be in a nice environment. We want to be able to have a chat and we want to be able to talk about philosophy, politics, culture, sexuality, religion, whatever we want, with no screaming, and people actually listening to each other, and maybe apply a discipline. Like, we'll all follow the Socratic method. I won't try and reply to your point until I've satisfied you that I know what your point is to your satisfaction, and vice versa. That would be the Socratic method. There are disciplines that you can put in place that would cause this to work. So anyway, the Conquer the Toxic Passivity course is going to be out from tomorrow. I'm proud of it. I like it. Self-praise is no praise at all, but I do actually like it. Spent a bit of money on it. It's got a higher production value than normal. I'm going to do a release tomorrow, and I'll do a special offer, and I'll run the special offer for a week. You will have the opportunity to get the Break the Trauma Bond course, the Heal the Superego course, the Conquer the Toxic Passivity course, and the Manipulate the Psychopath or Narcissist course, which hasn't been released yet, in one. If you've already got Break Trauma Bond, Heal the Superego, fine. You're going to be able to get the opportunity to get these courses. I'll just put them together and I'll do a big discount on it. I highly recommend that you at least get the Conquer Toxic Passivity course and the Heal the Superego course. I highly recommend that you do that, because if you're actually looking to get on with your life and you actually want to stop watching stupid YouTube videos by people like me because you're here because you're trying to find something that's going to help you to move on, and you want to actually move on, then I highly recommend that you do that. If anybody's got any questions, I'll take them now. Questions should be one sentence long and end in a question mark. Elizabeth says, are you sending this in an email offer? I will be, but we've got problems with the emails, boys and girls. If you're on Gmail or Yahoo or Hotmail, you need to whitelist the email address coach@spartanlifecoach.com, because you're not receiving my emails. Gmail has tightened up massively in the last 6 weeks. Don't know why. I use Gmail, so when I send out, I know whether it's getting. It doesn't even hit my spam box now. So when I send out a group email and I send it to my personal Gmail account, it doesn't even hit the spam box. So they're blocking. They may even just take, like, I use Aweber, and there's other email services like MailChimp. They might just be blocking them. They'll just go, right, no more Aweber, no more MailChimp. So you've got to whitelist coach@spartanlifecoach.com if you want to get my emails. Please don't ask in the comments here how to do that. This is the Spartan Life Coach. You're self-sufficient, you're assertive, you open a tab and you go and Google that shit. Don't ask me and don't ask other people to do it for you. You go find out how to do it. It's not hard. It takes like 3 minutes, if that. So if you're with Yahoo, then you would say, how do I whitelist on Yahoo email, and so on and so forth. But Gmail's really bad, and a lot of customers that I've spoken to with Yahoo and Hotmail accounts, they're just not getting the emails. So yeah. Just do it. Just do it. How do I distinguish between regaining my self-confidence and it coming off as narcissism? If you're even asking that question, I wouldn't worry about it. I would just surge ahead with your self-confidence. Narcissists are not sat around worrying about, oh, maybe I'll look narcissistic. They don't give a shit. In fact, they want to look narcissistic. They'll be, they're true narcissists. They'll be proud of it. So I wouldn't even worry about that, mate. When is the right moment to stop consuming content and start acting? Now, dude. Now. You've consumed enough. You've consumed enough. Everybody has. The world looks the way it does because of overconsumption. And I don't mean food. I mean passively receiving other people's dumb fucking ideas for hours a day. It's not good. So when is the right time? 5 years ago? We're behind. We're way behind. So now, get on with it. Start. We need to start producing. Absolutely. How do I deal with a mother who is so insecure she's constantly competing with me? Wow, this feels like a question from 2014. I think I did a video called something like it's called, if you do a video search on my channel, it's called The Daughters of Narcissistic Mothers. If she's constantly competing with you, maybe watch the video called The Daughters of Narcissistic Mothers. I'm not the daughter of a narcissistic mother. You probably tell. But I did that video and people liked it, so you can check that out. And there's actually a website called The Daughters of Narcissistic Mothers.com. You'll also find that really, really useful. Could be BPD, could be MPD, but it's somewhere in that spectrum. If she's competing with you all the time, trying on your clothes. I think there was a story that we went back and forth with on here. Oh, it was from I think it was Dr. Phil, or was it Oprah, where the woman had tried on her daughter's wedding dress before her on the day of the wedding, and then she turned up to the wedding in a white wedding dress. Her daughter's wedding, the mother wore a white wedding dress as well. And they said, you wore a white wedding dress. She went, it wasn't white. It wasn't white. It was off grey. And they showed a picture of her in a white wedding dress saying, yes, it was white. Okay. But it wasn't a wedding dress. And they were like, what in the world would you call this if it's not a wedding dress? And it was like, all right, it is a wedding dress and it was white, but you're all making too big of a fuss over it. You have my sympathy. You have my sympathy. I've watched this play out firsthand with a number of my girlfriends, and it's really, really, it's really debilitating for the daughter in question, for the child in question. What accent was that? That was, fuck you. That was clearly Dr. Phil. What you're trying to say is, what I'm hearing is. My mother wore ivory at my wedding. I was in an ivory dress. Yeah. #boundaries. It's not about you today, love. You had your day and you fucked it up. Yeah. Do you think there are two different types of human beings? No. Ones with consciousness and those who aren't conscious. So the dogmatic and politically correct response from the spiritual tradition would be, you know, we're all evolving, and we're all in a different place at a different time, and we're figuring it out. That's what I definitely would have said 3 or 4 years ago. Today, I don't know, a bit more of an edgelord, and would be tempted to wonder if there's actually a genetic issue, and if we are looking at something that is evolutionary and biological en route, where we look the same, mostly. Like, you can't tell by looking, but that some people are ahead of others and some people are behind. And I'm not up to, I used to be really into IQ when I was a kid, really, really big on IQ and IQ tests. I think it's one of the first papers I ever wrote in psychology was an IQ and IQ test. How should I put it? If somebody, say you have two people and one person is 30 points higher in IQ, and you go, oh, okay, so they're this much smarter than this person, because it's like, it's a proportionate quantifying scale. You go, well, they're this much smarter than you. And then you go, well, me know mathematics. Me know that if you just 15% smarter than me, you're not that smarter than me, but that difference might be the world of difference. It might be huge. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. And yeah, I do sometimes wonder. I'm like walking around and I go, we don't know that much about evolution, intelligence, consciousness, genetics. Where, you know, it's still, these are fields of study that are really interesting because they're still in their infancy. They're still being figured out. And I do wonder if it's actually possible that, yes, some people are just not as evolved. And then, okay, so this is really politically incorrect. This came from working in the security industry and then going back to the security industry and doing nightclub security with people, my colleagues, and then seeing the customers who are in there. And this was not that long ago, like I think in 2012, 2013, I was in really bad financial dire straits and I had to go back to doing nightclub security work, like wrestling with drugged up kids for £9 an hour. It was a wonderful time, and a very good use of my intellectual resources. And the question I got to in my own head when I was in that job was, okay, smart ass, me to me. Okay, smart ass. So you're saying if you take that guy and that girl and that dude and that girl there, and that you could take them to some foreign environment outside of their normal daily lives, and that in a period of time you could make them smarter. You could make them more sensitive, kinder, more aware, more appreciative. And I was like, I don't know. And I was like, well, I'm going to give you infinite resources. You have an infinite amount of money. You can drugs, therapy, whatever you want. Can you do it? And I was like, I don't think so. I think some people, and it's a, I don't want to turn this into one of these fucking videos, but it's kind of, that's like, it's an idea that at first seems kind and useful that actually might be very cruel, which is that anybody can do anything. They just need a bit of time and a bit of training. No, and then you'll say, well, nobody believes that literally. It's just a good principle. And it's like, well, actually, many people act as though it's literally true, and it's not helpful. Sometimes you do have to realize the limitations of the people around you and just go, okay, that's where that person is. And me trying to get them to do this, that, and the other is not helpful. It's like it's a waste of my time. It's frustrating for them, and it's bewildering for them. It's humiliating for them. So stop. Don't do that. It's not kind. So yeah, there's a long-winded answer to your question. People are comfortable in their warm, soiled diapers, says Stephen. Mike speaks and says, intelligence is not genetic. My family lives on farms in Europe, and I'm probably much more educated than them. I don't know whether the research would back the idea that intelligence is not genetic. I think there's quite a lot of evidence that intelligence is one of those things. It is pretty genetic. The better term is universal egalitarianism. Yes, born of social liberalism, which is a disgusting thing to a classic liberal. How do I deal with an ex-narc in my social circle? What do you mean an ex-narc? What do you mean? Do you mean that they used to work on the narcotics department of like the local police force? What do you mean an ex-narc? What do you mean deal with them? You miss the sound of cicadas. Best sleep therapy ever. It's lovely. Really, really nice. These sounds out here are nice. We've got a chicken coop next door. They've all gone to sleep. The dog woke them up before, and then they all started clucking, and all I could hear was cocks. Sorry? What's coming up in the life of Richard Grannon? Says Tully Archer. I hope more of this. I hope more of this. I've no plans to change anything or do anything major, just I'll take more of this. Thanks. If there is a God, this is okay. I'll stay on this level of the game. Thank you. Manuel B says, being from a farm doesn't mean your ancestors weren't smart. Not all smart people had access to education in the past. I'm not sure that was his point, but the way it was phrased sounded a little bit like that. Yeah, I mean, all my ancestors are super working class, factory workers and soldiers and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's just like you say, it's didn't have access to education, or didn't have access to opportunity, or whatever, you know. So there was no upward mobility until the the 80s and that. narcs copy anything good you do, then claim it as their own thought process, says Stephen. IQ comes from populations that were exposed to the cold during the Ice Age. That's... Listen, don't fucking start. Don't start. Oh, shit. Okay. I'm not going to get in trouble because you want to say crazy shit, okay? Why are histrionics part of the cluster B spectrum? They seem relatively benign compared to other disorders. Or do I have that wrong? No, I mean, you're right as an observation. There's a difference, I suppose, in the way the theoretical model is proposed and the way it actually gets used in real life. I don't know if many human beings in the entire history of psychiatry and psychotherapy have ever been diagnosed with one thing from the cluster B spectrum. It's usually comorbid. It would usually be with something else. And histrionic might just be a strategy rather than a disorder. I suspect that it is a strategy rather than a specific disorder. And it might be entirely context specific, depending on the power dynamics that the individual who's manifesting what we're calling histrionic personality disorder is looking at. So they go, well, I want power in this situation. I want supply in this situation. If I don't have money and I don't have the power of office, what powers do I have, and how can I get the attention and supply and power that I'm looking for? So yes, you're right to point that out. Relative to like psychopathy, which could be serial killers, histrionics, like, what's this? Somebody who tantrums and tends to maybe show off their sexuality a little bit too much and is childish. So how can that be in the same spectrum? But I think it's one of, you pointed at something that's like one of the big problems in psychology. It looks like it's equally weighted, but it looks like that the way it's written, but in practicality it isn't equally weighted. The complaint that I made, I think numerous times, about the way people are diagnosed with BPD is most clinicians are trained to look at a series of traits. God, I can't remember what they are now. It's been that long since I looked. I think there's 9 traits. Depending on what school of thought it is, or whether it's from the DSM or the World Health Organization, but they're equally weighted. Same with narcissism, it's equally weighted. And I'm like, for me, I've been saying that, and this is a bit of dogma that's remained for the last 5 years, is really entitlement. What was the other one that I was saying to look out for? And exploitation. You should look for entitlement and exploitation, because if somebody's a bit arrogant or a bit grandiose, or if somebody's in love with a false image of themselves, as one of the examples from NPD traits, so what? So like the story of Walter Mitty, he was in love with multiple false images of himself, but he wasn't described as mean or exploitative or harmful. He was just a bit of a dick. He was just a bit of an idiot. So, yeah. Recent studies have shown, have they? Care to cite them? A. Jordan says, recent studies have shown that we are much more affected by our thoughts than our genetics. What do you think? I think that you should post the recent studies, plural. Let's read them, and let's analyze the statistics and see what it actually says. I think that would be wise. I think that part of what I said before about the culture we live in being all about marketing and consumerism and just getting responses from people has trained people to think of science in a very, very stupid way, in a very dumb way. And I don't want you guys and girls to be dumb fucking consumers. Recent studies is paraphrasing for this is likely bullshit. This is like, show me the studies. And what did the studies actually say? And don't, if you read an article, even if it's published in a good newspaper, even if it's produced on Psychology Today, and it says this study says this, you go read the study and see what it says. Because I don't do it now, but I went through a phase for a long time that goes back to 2009, where if people posted it in an article or posted it in a forum or posted it in a internet blogs or whatever, and I did my own little experiment because I'm pedantic and a nerd, and I found that over half, not much more than half, not like 60%, but over half of the randomly chosen articles that I found where they said a study says this, it was false. The study might have said something like that, but not that. And in 3 out of the 20 cases I reviewed, the studies actually said the opposite of what the author claimed they'd said. You've got to learn how to read studies. You, at least, like, you don't need to learn statistics, but you need to learn that it's worth your while to find the study, open it up, and read. Well, just read the abstract. The abstract will tell you everything you need to know. But the vast majority of the population can't be asked to even open up another fucking tab on Google. That's where we're at. That's where I get asked questions on the YouTube comments all the time that would be answered by somebody just going, new tab, and it would be faster for them to type out the question into a search engine than it would be to write a comment on YouTube. You've got to look at the studies yourself. So the idea that we're more affected by our thoughts than our genetics, bullshit. No, it's false. It's probably somebody trying to sell you a course on probably the law of attraction. There's no way that we are more affected by our thoughts than our genetics. That sentence doesn't even make sense, because our genetics were impacting who we were before we could think. They were affecting us in the womb. So there you go. You've got 9 months of growing, the biggest growth spurt you'll ever do in your life, where you were this big, and then you became this big, and you were this big and you were a fucking tadpole, and then you were this big and you had fucking eyes and lungs. The biggest growth spurt you ever had? No thoughts. All genetics. Yeah. So, shame about them fucking studies, eh? Laura Ipsum says recent studies have shown that most people are incapable of comprehending recent studies. Do you guys do it? You know what? I not today, but another video. We'll do a step-by-step thing. We'll just go to Google Scholar. Like, you do it with me. I'll open up Google Scholar at the same time. I'll tell you that we'll pick an article at random. It'll be like narcissism in old-aged left-handed communists, and then we'll just pick out the first one, and then I'll screen share and I'll go, so that because there's fear. It's just fear. It's like, that's academic. It's another world. Not everything is on Google Scholar. It's better if you've got like something like JSTOR, but that's a subscription. But at least you can be like, okay, I can go and read a study, at least the abstract of how to read a study. Because in the health and fitness industry, in the diet and strength training, I mean, there's some shit spoken in psychology, but my God, the bullshit that is just bandied about by people who aren't very bright, by people who can't read studies. So they listen to what some other jock Jew said has told them a study says, and they go, well, jock Jew said number 1 said this, so it must be true. And I'm like, can I get the name of the researcher and maybe the date of that study, please? They'll be like, oh, I'll find it for you. They send it to me, and I'm like, doesn't say what Jock Jew said number 1 says it says. Doesn't even come close to saying what he says it says. Everybody should learn how to do it. Don't be scared. I mean, that's also part of being a passive consumer, is we're brainwashed into letting authority figures tell us what to think. That has to stop. That has to stop. And if anyone's going to say, when should it stop? They probably should have stopped a while ago, so we're behind the curve. We need to stop it. Nobody else is coming. Like, nobody's coming to save us. It's just us. If we don't stop it, it's not stopping. If we don't set a boundary and go, okay, enough, stop, it's not stopping. The bus keeps going off the cliff. Don't just sit there and go, oh, somebody else will do it. Nobody's doing anything. Nobody's coming to save us. We stop it or it doesn't get stopped. Richard, is there any way to find out if a person is benevolent but on a journey versus a psychopath who is scheming to destroy you? Is there any way to find out if a person is benevolent but on a journey? I don't know what that expression means, I'm sorry. Better than just receiving. Can we chat together as cluster A fawns, please? That might help you, yeah? I mean, if you speak to other people who are codependent, I've seen that at seminars. You speak to other people with CPTSD, and in fact, not codependent. Speak